My name is Kenya Matthews, and at 32, I make my living as a criminal defense attorney. Just 3 days ago, my life took an unexpected turn when my twin sister walked into my office, so badly beaten that I almost didn't recognize her. When she confided that her husband was responsible, I made a snap decision that would irrevocably change both our lives. I decided to swap places with her, and I vowed to make sure he never forgot what he'd done. You see, there's something primal that ignites within you when your identical twin, your other half, shows up battered and bruised, begging you not to involve the police, because she's paralyzed with fear. I've dedicated the last decade of my life to putting criminals behind bars. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine I'd have to become one to protect my own sister, but here we are, and I wouldn't hesitate to do it all over again. If this story strikes a chord with you, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to stay updated on similar stories, and drop a comment below with the city you're watching from. I'm curious to see how far this message resonates. Now, let me tell you exactly how I plan to teach that monster a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. First, you need to understand the unique bond between my sister and me. We're not just ordinary twins. We're identical in every way. Same face, same voice, same mannerisms. Growing up, even our own parents struggled to tell us apart sometimes. We used to switch classes in school, play elaborate pranks on our teachers, and trick our friends. Back then, it was all innocent fun and games. We were inseparable, two halves of the same soul, as our mother always said. But life has a funny way of drifting people apart, doesn't it? After college, I pursued law school and a career in the city, working relentless 80-hour weeks at a prestigious law firm, relentlessly climbing the ladder toward partnership. What the hell is this? He spat, ejecting the food back onto his plate. This tastes like cardboard. Can't you do anything right? Diane chimed in immediately, as if she had been eagerly awaiting her cue. I've been telling you, Marcus, she can't cook. She can't clean. I don't know what you see in her. Tamika snickered from the couch. Girl can't do nothing but make babies. Marcus abruptly stood up, and that's when I witnessed it, the raw violence simmering just beneath the surface. He stalked toward me, where I stood by the stove, his body language radiating predatory intent. He was accustomed to Kesha cowering, backing away, apologizing, and begging for forgiveness. I remained motionless, unflinching, simply meeting his gaze head-on. I work all damn day, he snarled, his voice low and menacing. I put food on this table, clothes on your back, and a roof over your head, and this is what you give me? Garbage? He raised his hand, poised to strike. I had been anticipating this. 3 years of Kesha's harrowing accounts had prepared me. He always initiated the abuse with a slap, an open-handed strike intended to humiliate as much as to inflict physical pain. As his palm hurtled toward my face, I intercepted his wrist midair. The shock that registered on his face was exquisite. Absolutely exquisite. He was a large man who was accustomed to overpowering a woman who was 30 pounds lighter than him. But I work out. I train. I box. And more than that, I was fueled by 3 years of bottled-up rage. I tightened my grip on his wrist, not enough to fracture it, but enough to inflict pain, enough to convey the unmistakable message that something had fundamentally changed, that the woman he thought he knew was not who he thought she was. Not tonight, Marcus, I said, my voice still soft, but now laced with an edge he had never encountered from Kesha before. I've had a long day too. He attempted to wrench his wrist free, but failed. All of you are going to sit down at that table, and you're going to listen very carefully. They sat down without protest. They didn't have a choice anymore. I opened the folder and spread the contents across the table. Medical reports, graphic photographs, video footage burned onto DVDs, audio recordings on USB drives, bank statements revealing Marcus's extensive gambling debts, and detailed documentation of every single crime, every assault, every threat, and every act of abuse committed in that house over the past 3 years. This, I said, gesturing to the overwhelming pile of evidence, is what I've been building. This is 3 years of meticulously documented evidence. 3 years of your collective crimes. And yesterday and today, I added even more damning evidence. Video footage of Marcus assaulting me, and video footage of you, Diane, attempting to poison me. Not to mention audio recordings of all three of you conspiring to have me forcibly institutionalized. Marcus's hands were shaking uncontrollably. Who are you? He stammered. I gave him a knowing smile. I'm Kesha's identical twin sister, Kenya Matthews, and I'm a criminal defense attorney. I've spent the last 3 days meticulously documenting every single crime you've committed against my sister. The color completely drained from all three of their faces. You tricked us, Tamika whispered, her voice barely audible. I did, I said, without a hint of remorse. And every single bit of evidence I've collected is entirely admissible in court. Every recording was made in a home that belongs to Kesha. Every video was captured on property she owns. It's all perfectly legal. All of it. Diane finally broke down, actual tears streaming down her face. You can't do this. You can't destroy our family. Your family? I laughed, and there was absolutely no humor in it. You destroyed your own family the moment you decided to torture a woman for 3 years. And like any tool, it only works if someone uses it. Victims can't always use it themselves. They're too scared, too controlled, too broken. So, sometimes someone else has to pick up that tool and wield it on their behalf. That's what I did for my sister. I picked up the law and used it like a weapon against her abusers. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I'd do it for anyone who needed it. 3 days. That's all it took to dismantle 3 years of abuse. 3 days of strategic planning, careful documentation, and calculated confrontations. 3 days of being someone I'm not. Or maybe someone I've always been but never had to be before. Marcus Johnson is broken now. His life is in shambles. His reputation is destroyed. His family is scattered. His money is gone. And every month when he has to write that child support check, he's reminded of what he lost, not because I took it from him, but because he threw it all away. He had a good woman, a beautiful daughter, a comfortable life, and he destroyed all of it with his fists, his rage, and his insatiable need for control. I don't feel sorry for him, not even a little bit. He made his choices. Now he's living with the consequences. Diane learned that enabling abuse makes you just as guilty as the abuser. She lost her son, her granddaughter, her home, her savings. She's all alone now, and she has no one to blame but herself. Tamika learned that being a bully has consequences. She lost her free ride, her support system, her family. She's back with her ex-husband, probably making his life hell, continuing the cycle of dysfunction. And Kesha learned that she's stronger than she ever thought possible, that she deserves love, respect, and safety, that she doesn't have to accept abuse just because someone calls it love. Kesha, on the other hand, chose to stay in her hometown and become an elementary school teacher, shaping young minds and nurturing a love for reading in second graders. I was chasing success, while she, I suppose, was chasing peace, perhaps normalcy, maybe even a family. And that's when she met Marcus Johnson. God, I should have seen the red flags waving. I should have paid closer attention to her life. But I was too consumed with building my career, taking depositions, winning cases, and making a name for myself in the legal world. I missed the subtle warning signs. I missed everything. Marcus initially seemed like the perfect catch. A pharmaceutical sales representative with a stable job, decent income, and undeniable charm. He was the kind of man who opened doors, pulled out chairs, and always knew exactly what to say. At their wedding, he delivered a heartfelt speech about how Kesha was the best thing that had ever happened to him, promising to dedicate his life to making her happy. I remember gazing at my sister in her white dress, radiant with hope, and thinking, she deserves this. She deserves to be loved like this. I was a fool, blinded by appearances. The distance between us widened after the wedding. At first, I attributed it to the natural course of life. She now had a husband, and soon after, a baby, my sweet niece Aaliyah. I, on the other hand, was drowning in cases, with clients constantly demanding my attention. Our daily conversations dwindled to once a week, then once a month, eventually reduced to just holidays and birthdays. And each time I saw her, she seemed diminished, quieter, as if someone was gradually muting her volume, dimming her inner light. I dismissed my concerns as mere imagination, telling myself, marriage changes people. Motherhood changes people. I rationalized with a multitude of lies, because the truth was too horrific to confront. His face flushed crimson, a mixture of embarrassment and simmering anger. He used his other hand to try to pry my fingers loose, but I held firm for another 3 seconds, just long enough to underscore my point before releasing him. Marcus stumbled backward, cradling his wrist, staring at me as if I had sprouted a second head. Diane gasped, "Kesha, how dare you put your hands on my son?" Tamika sat up straight on the couch, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Girl, you done lost your damn mind." But Marcus simply stood there, breathing heavily, transfixed on me. And I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was desperately trying to decipher what had triggered this transformation, how to reassert his dominance and regain control. He was accustomed to winning, accustomed to dictating the narrative, and I had just demonstrated that the rules of the game had irrevocably changed. "Dinner's getting cold," I said calmly. "Y'all should eat." Then, I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, dumbfounded, enraged, and for the first time in 3 years, uncertain. I went upstairs and tucked Aaliyah into bed, reading her a story, The Paper Bag Princess, about a princess who saves herself and doesn't require a prince's intervention. Seemed appropriate, given the circumstances. She drifted off to sleep while holding my hand, and I sat there for a long while, simply watching her breathe, contemplating all the countless nights she had gone to sleep, listening to her mother being subjected to violence. Never again would she have to endure such horrors. Around 11 o'clock, I heard footsteps approaching outside the bedroom door. 2 distinct sets of footsteps, Diane and Tamika, coming to put me back in my place. I had anticipated this. Abusers despise losing control, and I had just challenged the entire family hierarchy. They had to retaliate. When you beat her, choked her, burned her with cigarettes, and when you slapped a 5-year-old child across the face, simply for crying. I pulled out another set of documents. Divorce papers, already meticulously filled out, just missing Marcus's signature. "Here's how this is going to go," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "You have 2 choices and only 2. Choice number 1, I take all of this evidence to the district attorney's office on Monday morning. I file a criminal complaint, and I press charges for domestic violence, assault, battery, attempted poisoning, conspiracy, child abuse, and about a dozen other crimes. Between the 3 of you, you're looking at a combined sentence of 40 to 60 years in prison." All 3 of them were now openly crying. Marcus, the big, tough guy who loved to beat up women, was now sobbing like a helpless child. "Or," I continued, "choice number 2, you sign these divorce papers right now. You agree to grant full custody of Aaliyah to Kesha with absolutely no visitation rights for Marcus. You pay child support in the amount of $3,000 a month until Aaliyah turns 18. That's 13 years, totaling $378,000. The house stays with Kesha. It's in her name, anyway. Marcus, you, your mother, and your sister have 24 hours to move out, and I'll file a restraining order against all 3 of you, requiring a minimum distance of 500 feet at all times." "We don't have that kind of money," Marcus protested weakly. I smiled coldly. "Yes, you do. I've seen your bank statements, Marcus. You've got about $40,000 in your 401k, and your mother has a settlement from your father's workplace death, $900,000 hidden in a jar in the shed, wrapped in plastic." Diane gasped audibly. "How did you?" "I'm thorough," I said simply. "You'll liquidate assets. You'll take out loans. I don't care how you get the money, but you will get it because the alternative is prison. And, trust me, prison is much, much worse." Aaliyah learned that women don't have to be victims, that standing up to bullies is possible, that her mother is a survivor and her aunt is a fighter, and she comes from a line of strong women who don't back down. And me? I learned that sometimes being good means breaking rules, that justice and legality aren't always the same thing, that the most important battles are the ones we fight for the people we love. I'm Kenya Matthews. I'm 32 years old. I'm a criminal defense attorney who spent 3 days impersonating my twin sister to save her from her abusive husband. And I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. If this story moved you, if it made you angry or sad or hopeful or determined, hit that like button. Let me know this message reached you. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories about real people surviving real horrors and coming out on the other side. And comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've survived something like this. Tell me if you know someone who needs to hear this story. Let's build a community of survivors and supporters and people who refuse to stay silent when others are being hurt. Because silence is what abusers count on. Silence is what allows them to continue. Silence is what kills. So let's make some noise. Let's talk about domestic violence. Let's talk about the failures of the system. Let's talk about creative solutions and unconventional justice and the power of love to overcome evil. My sister is free now. She's safe. She's happy. She's healing. And that's worth every rule I bent, every line I crossed, every risk I took. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Stay safe out there, and remember, if you're in danger, reach out. If someone you love is in danger, step up. We're all we've got. This is Kenya Matthews signing off. Peace. My twin sister, my other half, was being systematically destroyed right before my eyes, and I was too blind to see it until that fateful Tuesday 3 days ago. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon. I recall it distinctly because Tuesdays are usually my lighter days, filled with paperwork and devoid of court appearances. I was in my office reviewing case files, sipping lukewarm coffee, when my secretary's voice crackled through the intercom. There was an unusual edge to her tone, a palpable sense of concern. Miss Matthews, your sister is here, but Kenya, she doesn't look well at all. My heart plummeted before I even laid eyes on her. I instructed my secretary to send her in immediately and to hold all my calls. The door creaked open, and I looked up, and I swear to God, for a fleeting moment, I didn't recognize the woman standing there. She was concealed behind sunglasses, indoors, in my windowless office, and she was wearing long sleeves, despite the sweltering 85-degree summer heat, topped off with a turtleneck. She was also limping, favoring her left side, as if each step sent agonizing jolts of pain through her body. It was Kesha. I rose from my desk, my attorney's brain already kicking into high gear, meticulously cataloging every detail, building a case even before I understood the nature of the crime. What's wrong? What happened? I asked, my voice laced with urgency. She remained silent, simply trembling. I rounded my desk, closing the distance between us, and locked my office door, ensuring complete privacy. Whatever was about to unfold demanded utmost confidentiality. Take off the sunglasses, I commanded, my voice harsher than intended, fueled by a burgeoning fear. Terrified, actually, because deep down I already knew. Somewhere in the pit of my stomach, I already knew the unspeakable truth. I stepped out into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind me to ensure that Aaliyah remained undisturbed. The two women were waiting for me, their arms crossed, their faces hardened. We need to talk, Diane stated, her voice dripping with hostility. About what? I inquired, maintaining a neutral tone. About your attitude, Tamika interjected. About your little stunt downstairs. You think you can embarrass Marcus like that in his own house? The house that's in my name, I corrected her quietly. Let's not overlook that crucial detail. Diane's face flushed crimson with anger. That house was purchased with my son's money. Actually, I said, allowing a touch of my attorney's voice to surface, the down payment originated from my parents. Furthermore, the deed is solely in my name. Legally speaking, this is my house. You and your daughter are merely guests, guests who don't contribute to rent, don't assist with utility bills, and don't offer any financial assistance with household expenses. The two women exchanged stunned glances. Kesha had never spoken this way before, had never been aware of these facts, had never stood up for herself. But I wasn't Kesha. I don't know what's gotten into you, Diane hissed, stepping closer, her voice laced with menace. But this attitude stops now. Tamika moved to my other side, flanking me, effectively trapping me in the narrow hallway. Yeah, Marcus is too soft on you.
Somebody needs to teach you some respect.
She shoved me, not with significant force, but enough to make a point, enough to assert physical dominance. In the past, Kesha would have stumbled backward, apologized profusely, and backed down. I didn't budge. Didn't even rock back on my heels. I simply stood there, as solid as a brick wall, and stared intently at Tamika. Don't touch me again, I warned, my voice dangerously low. Or what? She taunted, shoving me again, this time with slightly more force. I remained unmoved. I let that sink in for a moment, watching them process their options, watching them realize they had absolutely no leverage, no power, and no way out except the one I was offering. You have until 5 p.m. today to decide, I said, rising to my feet. If you choose option 2, Marcus signs these papers, and we go to the bank together to set up the payment schedule. If you choose option 1, or if you don't choose at all, I make a single phone call, and you're all in handcuffs by dinner time. I gathered up my evidence and placed it back in my bag. I'm going to pick up Aaliyah from school now. When I get back, I want a decision. I left them sitting at that table. 3 people who had spent years terrorizing others, now completely powerless and utterly terrified. The drive to Aaliyah's school felt surreal. I'd actually done it. I'd broken them. In just 3 days, I'd systematically dismantled an entire structure of abuse. But I wasn't done yet. The final confrontation was still to come. I picked up my niece from school and brought her to my apartment, my real apartment, where Kesha was waiting. The reunion between mother and daughter was everything I'd hoped it would be. Tears, hugs, kisses, and genuine laughter filled the room. Aaliyah kept touching her mother's face, as if she couldn't quite believe she was real. Mommy, you look different, Aaliyah said, her eyes shining with happiness. You look happy. I am happy, baby, Kesha said, crying and smiling simultaneously. I'm so happy. We allowed Aaliyah to watch cartoons while Kesha and I talked privately in the kitchen. It's almost over, I told her. By tonight, you'll be completely free. Legally and officially free. Kenya, what did you do? She asked, her voice filled with both awe and trepidation. Everything necessary, I said. Nothing more, nothing less. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. It was Marcus. We'll sign, he said, his voice hollow and defeated. We'll do whatever you want. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks, and that's when I noticed them. The unmistakable bruises encircling her neck, shaped like fingers, for distinct marks on one side, and one on the other. Someone had choked my sister. Someone had dared to wrap their hands around her delicate throat and squeeze the life out of her. I reached out and removed the sunglasses myself, and what I witnessed, Jesus Christ, what I witnessed will forever haunt my waking moments. Her left eye was swollen shut, the surrounding skin a grotesque tapestry of deep purple and black. Her lip was split, still caked with dried blood. A gaping gash marred her cheekbone, a wound that desperately needed stitches, but was left unattended. And her eyes, the one that still managed to peek through the swelling, was vacant, devoid of life, as if someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that defined Kesha, leaving behind a hollow shell. Who did this? I demanded, but I already knew the answer. There's only one person who gets that intimately close, who has that kind of access, who can inflict pain where no one else can see. Kenya, please, she whispered, her voice barely audible, broken and hoarse. Please don't call the police. Please, he'll kill me. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd kill me. Roll up your sleeves, I instructed, my tone leaving no room for argument. I was commanding, using my courtroom voice, the one that could coax confessions from the most hardened witnesses and break down even the most stoic defendants. She hesitated, and that hesitation spoke volumes, confirming my worst fears.
But I needed to see it for myself.
I needed to grasp the full extent of the horror. So, I reached out and pushed up her sleeves myself, and oh God, the map of hell that was unveiled was seared into my memory. Bruises adorned her arms, a gruesome mosaic of old yellow ones fading into fresh purple ones. And I could detect the growing confusion in her eyes, the nascent fear beginning to creep in. "Let me explain something to both of you," I said, my voice now as cold as ice. "I've documented every bruise, every injury, every single instance of abuse inflicted over the past 3 years. I have photographic evidence, comprehensive medical records, sworn statements from neighbors who've been witness to the screaming, all of which constitutes felony domestic violence under the law." Diane began to speak, likely to interrupt, but I pressed on, not allowing her an opening. "And you too," I continued, "are accessories to felony assault. You've actively participated in the abuse, you've encouraged its continuation, and you yourselves have physically attacked me. That's conspiracy, plain and simple. In this state, that offense carries a hefty sentence of 5 to 10 years. The color had visibly drained from both women's faces. "So, here's exactly how things are going to unfold," I stated, leaving no room for argument. "You're going to return to your respective rooms immediately. You will not touch me, and you will not utter any threats toward me. And tomorrow, we are all going to engage in a very serious, no-holds-barred discussion about the future of this household. Is that perfectly clear?" Diane finally found her voice, though it wavered. "You can't possibly prove any of that." I gave her a confident smile. "Diane, I'm a lawyer. Proving things is quite literally what I do for a living. It's my profession, my expertise." I turned deliberately and walked back into Aaliyah's room, closing the door firmly behind me, leaving them standing in the hallway, completely stunned into silence. That was confrontation number 1 in this battle. I had successfully established that the old, abusive power dynamic was irrevocably broken, and that Kesha, or rather, I wasn't going to take it anymore. But I was under no illusions. I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Just please don't send us to prison. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I said, and hung up. Kesha rode with me back to the house. It was time for the final act. Time for Marcus to fully grasp what he'd lost. Time for him to understand the full scope of his utter failure. We walked in together, me and Kesha, identical twins, side by side. The expressions on their faces when they saw both of us were priceless. Confusion, horror, and the dawning realization that they'd been played from the very beginning. "Hello, Marcus," Kesha said softly, a hint of triumph in her voice. Marcus's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. "But you, how?" "My sister saved me," Kesha said, her voice strong and unwavering. "She did what I couldn't do. She fought back. And now you're going to give me my life back." I spread the divorce papers on the table. "Sign here, and initial here." Marcus picked up the pen with a shaking hand. He stared at the papers, at the terms, at the life he was about to lose forever. And then he looked directly at me. "I could kill you for this," he said, his voice a low, menacing growl. I leaned in close, my gaze unwavering. "Try it. Please try it. Give me a reason to skip the civil route and go straight to criminal charges. I'm begging you." He signed the papers. Every page, every line, every initial. His hand shook uncontrollably the entire time, but he signed. Diane was next. She had to sign an agreement to vacate the premises, to surrender any claim to the house, and to stay away from Kesha and Aaliyah. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred as she signed.
"You're evil," she spat.
"You're a devil." "No," I said calmly. "I'm justice. There's a difference." Thomas signed her agreement without uttering a single word. She was done fighting, done pretending, and simply wanted to escape with whatever shred of dignity she had left. When all the papers were signed, I gathered them up and placed them securely in my bag. Belt marks crisscrossed her forearms, evidence of her desperate attempts to shield herself. Circular burn marks, cigarette burns, dotted her skin like some grotesque constellation. Defensive wounds marred her hands, where she had futilely tried to block punches. And on her wrists rope burns, a chilling testament to the fact that he'd tied her up. That son of a bitch had bound and restrained my sister. Something inside me snapped. No, not snapped. Shattered, exploded. A rage so pure and incandescent that it incinerated every professional boundary I had ever erected, every ethical line I had ever drawn. This wasn't merely a client. This wasn't just another case. This was my sister, my twin, the other half of my very soul. How long? I managed to choke out, through clenched teeth. 3 years, she replied so softly that I almost missed it. It started about 6 months after we got married. 3 years. 3 years of this unimaginable hell, and I had been oblivious, blind, completely absent. Tell me everything, I implored, from the very beginning, every single detail. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. And so she began to recount her harrowing ordeal. God, the things she told me. It started small, she said, control disguised as care. Marcus had wanted to know her whereabouts at all times, who she was talking to, and what she was doing. He claimed it was out of his overwhelming love for her that he couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to her. He then began to criticize her clothing, deeming it too tight, too revealing, suggesting that she was seeking attention from other men. Consequently, she started dressing more conservatively. Next, it was her friends who came under fire. He voiced his disapproval of them, branding them as bad influences who were trying to sabotage their marriage. As a result, she ceased all contact with them. Then it was my turn. Marcus, with his inflated ego and insatiable need for control, wouldn't let this challenge stand. His pride had been deeply wounded, and he would undoubtedly retaliate. The only question that remained was when and in what form his retaliation would take. I got my answer the very next morning. I'd woken up early, prepared breakfast for Aaliyah, and made sure she was ready for school. Diane and Timika were conspicuously avoiding me, remaining sequestered in their rooms, whispering incessantly to each other. Marcus, still reeling from the events of the previous night, had crashed on the couch, too drunk and disoriented to confront anything. But upon my return from dropping Aaliyah off at school, he was waiting for me, stone-cold sober, visibly angry, and resolute in his purpose. We need to talk, he said, his voice dangerously low. In the bedroom now. I followed him upstairs without protest, closed the bedroom door behind me, and waited for him to make his move. He wasted no time, turning on me immediately, grabbing my arm with that same brutal grip that had left countless bruises on Kesha over the years. His fingers dug mercilessly into my flesh, hard enough to cause sharp pain, hard enough to leave visible marks. I don't know what the hell has gotten into you, he hissed, his face mere inches from mine. But it stops now. Today, right now. You're my wife. You do exactly what I say. You show me the respect I deserve. You know your place. You're hurting me, Marcus, I said calmly, refusing to show any fear. Good. He squeezed even harder, relishing the pain he was inflicting. Maybe you'll remember this. Maybe you'll think twice before embarrassing me like that again. I didn't fight him. Didn't resist in any way. I simply allowed him to grip my arm, allowed him to dig his fingers in deeper, allowed him to create fresh bruises on top of Kesha's old, fading ones. Because every single second of this encounter was being meticulously recorded. Legal, binding, and enforceable. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to be out of this house, I said, my voice firm and resolute. Take your belongings, but nothing that belongs to Kesha or Aaliyah. I'll be here with a sheriff's deputy to supervise. If you're not out by then, you'll be removed by force. Marcus stood up. He was a big man, and for a moment, I thought he might actually try something, might attempt one last, desperate act of violence. I was ready for it, almost hoping for it. But he just stood there, broken and utterly defeated. Who are you? He asked again, his voice filled with a mixture of confusion and despair. What kind of person does this? The kind who loves her sister, I said, my voice unwavering. The kind who protects her family. The kind who doesn't let monsters win. I took Kesha's hand. Come on, let's go home. We walked out of that house together, leaving Marcus and his family behind, leaving 3 years of unrelenting hell behind and walking together toward a future filled with freedom and hope. The next day, I was there at 5 p.m. sharp, accompanied by a sheriff's deputy. The house was completely empty. They'd taken all of their belongings and disappeared, probably to Diane's sister's place across town.
Good.
The farther away, the better. I changed all the locks, installed a proper security system, and set up cameras, visible ones this time, not hidden, ensuring that Kesha and Aaliyah would be safe and secure. Over the next few weeks, I watched my sister slowly, but surely transform. She started smiling again. Really smiling. Not the forced, frightened smile I'd seen for years. She laughed freely, played with Aaliyah, and went back to teaching, actually enjoying it once again. Aaliyah changed, too. The ever-present fear gradually faded from her eyes. She stopped flinching at loud noises and began making friends at school. She drew pictures of her and her mommy, and in every picture, they were both smiling. He accused me of making Kesha feel inadequate about her own life, claiming that I was constantly flaunting my success, making her feel small and insignificant. That wasn't true. It was never true. But she believed him, or perhaps she was simply too emotionally drained to fight. So, the calls stopped, the visits ceased. He had effectively isolated her completely, and I had unwittingly allowed it to happen because I was too engrossed in my own life to notice the danger signs. The first instance of physical violence occurred on a Thursday night. She remembered the specific day because it was garbage collection day, and she had forgotten to take the bins out to the curb. Such a seemingly insignificant oversight. But Marcus arrived home intoxicated, a state he was increasingly finding himself in, and when he noticed the bins still by the garage, something inside him just detonated. He seized her by the hair, dragged her outside, and slammed her face into the garbage bin, snarling that if she was going to act like trash, she could reside with the trash. She recounted that she was in shock, unable to comprehend what had just transpired. The following morning, he offered profuse apologies, presented her with flowers, sobbed uncontrollably, and swore that such an incident would never recur. And like a complete idiot, her words, not mine, she believed him. But it did happen again and again and again. Each time he lost money gambling, and he gambled compulsively, squandering entire paychecks on sports betting, he would return home and unleash his pent-up rage on her. Every time he endured a bad day at work, she bore the brunt of his frustration. Every time his mother phoned and complained about something trivial, Kesha became his punching bag, both literally and figuratively. And speaking of his mother, Jesus Christ, that woman, Diane Johnson, moved in with them a year into the marriage, and that's when things spiraled exponentially downward. The hidden camera I'd strategically installed in the bedroom the day before was capturing everything in vivid detail. The audio recorder discreetly tucked away in my pocket was picking up every word, every threat, every nuance of his abuse. Evidence. Always meticulously building evidence. You think you can just change? Marcus continued, his voice rising with each word. Think you can suddenly grow a spine? You're nothing without me. Nothing. You were nothing when I met you, and you're still nothing. A nobody teacher scraping by, raising a kid alone. I gave you everything. Is that what you tell yourself? I asked, my voice steady and unwavering. His hand suddenly came up, clenched into a fist this time, poised to strike. And that's when I moved decisively. I had been still, passive, deliberately letting him believe he was in control of the situation. But now, in a swift, fluid motion, I shifted my weight, deflected his incoming arm, and expertly used his own momentum against him. One quick sweep of his legs, and Marcus Johnson, all 6 feet 2 inches and 200 pounds of him, crashed heavily to the floor. I stood over him, my gaze unwavering. Don't ever try that again. Then I turned and walked out of the room, leaving him sprawled on the ground, utterly shocked and consumed by furious rage. That was the precise moment that Marcus fully realized he couldn't control me physically. So, predictably, he resorted to the tactic that all abusers eventually employ when they lose physical dominance. He called the police. The officers arrived an hour later. 2 uniformed officers, one older veteran cop and one noticeably younger rookie. Marcus had clearly put on a convincing performance, claiming I'd attacked him without provocation, that I'd gone completely crazy, and that he genuinely feared for his safety. I met them calmly at the door, a thick folder already in my hands. "Officers," I said in a measured tone, "my husband called you because I defended myself when he tried to hit me." Marcus, predictably, tried to fight the custody arrangement. Men like him always do. But I represented Kesha in family court, and I presented every single piece of evidence I'd so meticulously collected. The judge took one look at the medical records, the photographs, and the videos of Marcus assaulting Kesha, and terminated his parental rights on the spot. No visitation, no contact, nothing. The child support payments arrived promptly each month. Marcus had to sell his car, cash out his retirement savings, and take out multiple loans to make the payments.
Good.
Let him struggle. Let him know what it's like to have absolutely nothing. Diane filed for bankruptcy after being forced to liquidate her hidden savings. Tama moved in with her ex-husband, which I'm sure is its own special kind of hell. The three of them are scattered now, broken, and no longer a united force of abuse. And Kesha? She's thriving. 6 months later, she met someone new. A good man, a teacher like her, someone gentle and kind who treats her with the respect and love she deserves. I vetted him thoroughly, of course, ran a comprehensive background check, and did a deep dive into his history. He's clean. He's good. They're taking it slow, giving Kesha the time and space she needs to heal. Maybe she'll never be ready for marriage again, and that's perfectly okay. She doesn't need a man to complete her. She's complete on her own. But watching her open herself up to the possibility of love again, of trust again, that's the real victory. Not the divorce papers, not the restraining orders, and not Marcus's broken spirit. The real victory is seeing my sister remember who she was before he tried to destroy her. People often ask me if I regret it. If I regret crossing ethical lines, impersonating my sister, entrapping Marcus and his family, if I regret becoming essentially a vigilante. And my answer is always simple. No. Not for one single second. Because Diane didn't merely condone her son's violence, she actively participated in it. Kesha described the psychological torture she endured, how Diane would relentlessly criticize everything she did. Her cooking was either too salty or too bland. Her cleaning was never satisfactory. Her parenting was too lenient. Her clothing was deemed too extravagant for someone who supposedly contributed nothing to the household, conveniently overlooking the fact that Kesha was working full-time as a teacher while simultaneously caring for a toddler. Diane acted as if Kesha was some sort of parasitic freeloader. And then there was Tamika, Marcus' sister. She had recently gone through a divorce and moved back home, by which I mean she moved into Marcus and Kesha's house, rent-free, contribution-free, simply occupying space and exacerbating the existing abuse. Tamika treated Kesha like a personal servant, demanding that Kesha cook for her, clean for her, and do her laundry. If Kesha ever dared to resist, ever dared to say no, Tamika would run crying to Marcus, who would then punish Kesha for disrespecting his precious family. So, it wasn't just a single abuser, it was a coordinated trifecta of tormentors. A comprehensive system of abuse working in perfect harmony to systematically break my sister down piece by agonizing piece. But the revelation that truly sent me over the edge, the detail that ignited an inferno of righteous fury within me, was what she disclosed about Aaliyah. My niece, barely 5 years old, with her bright eyes, sweet disposition, and innocent soul, was witnessing all of this, observing her father physically assault her mother, internalizing the notion that this was normal, that this was love. He hit her, Kesha said, her voice cracking completely. Last night, Aaliyah was crying because she was scared. And Marcus told her to shut up. And when she couldn't stop crying, he slapped her across the face. Kenya, she's only 5 years old.
5.
Before you take his statement, I'd like to show you something. I opened the folder and presented its contents. Inside were meticulously organized copies of medical records spanning 3 years, documentation of emergency room visits for supposedly accidental injuries, graphic photographs of bruises, cuts, black eyes, and irrefutable evidence of broken ribs, a fractured wrist, and even cigarette burns. The older officer's face visibly changed as he meticulously looked through the file. He'd undoubtedly seen this pattern of abuse before, far too many times. He knew exactly what he was looking at. "Ma'am," he said gently, his voice tinged with concern. "How long has this been going on?" 3 years, I stated simply. "He beats me. He chokes me. He repeatedly threatens to kill me if I ever try to leave him." I paused, then continued. "And this morning, when I finally stood up to him and refused to be a victim any longer, he tried to hit me again. So I pushed him away in self-defense. That's when he called you." I then pulled out my phone and displayed the video from that morning, capturing every brutal detail. Marcus grabbing my arm, spewing threats, pulling back his fist, ready to punch. All of it captured in crystal clear, high definition. The younger officer looked visibly sickened by what he was seeing. The older one looked increasingly angry. "Mr. Johnson," the veteran cop said, his voice now hard and devoid of any sympathy, "based on this overwhelming evidence, you're lucky we're not arresting you right here and now." He turned back to me, his expression softening slightly. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges?" I shook my head slowly. "Not yet. I just want him to know, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that someone is watching now, that if he ever lays a hand on me again, there will be serious consequences." The officer turned back to Marcus, who had gone ashen white as a sheet. "Sir, we'll be filing a detailed report about this incident. Because here's what people don't understand about domestic violence. The system isn't actually built to protect victims. It's designed to protect abusers. Victims are forced to jump through 1,000 hoops just to prove they're being hurt. They have to meticulously document everything, photograph everything, and report everything. And even then, even with mountains of irrefutable evidence, abusers walk free more often than not. The average woman tries to leave an abusive relationship 7 times before she finally succeeds. 7 times. And 1 in 4 women who do manage to leave end up being killed by their abuser within the first 2 years of separation. The system failed my sister for 3 long years. So I became the system. I became her protection. I became her justice. Was it legal?
Most of it, yes. I was extremely careful about that.
The impersonation was ethically gray, but not technically illegal. Kesha gave me explicit permission to be in her home and to use her identity within that specific context. The recordings were all perfectly legal because they were made in her home with her full knowledge and consent. The evidence I collected was entirely admissible in court. Was it right? Absolutely, without question. Because at the end of the day, what's truly more important? Strictly adhering to every technical rule of legal ethics, or saving a woman's life and protecting a child from growing up in a house filled with violence and fear. I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, she went too far. She should have just called the police, filed a report, and worked through the proper channels. Let me tell you what typically happens when you work through the proper channels. The police come, they take a report, and maybe, just maybe, they arrest the abuser. If they do, he's usually out on bail within hours, and he comes home angrier than ever. And the victim inevitably pays the price for calling 911. Restraining orders? And I tried to intervene, Kesha continued, desperation lacing her voice. I tried to protect her. And he grabbed me by the throat and choked me until I couldn't breathe. He slammed my head against the kitchen counter over and over. And Diane and Tamika just stood there watching. And then they joined in. Tamika scratched me with a comb, and Diane shoved dirty dish rags into my mouth to silence me. I couldn't breathe. I literally could not breathe. My vision blurred, and my hands began to tremble uncontrollably, forcing me to sit down before I collapsed. I can't do this anymore, Kenya, Kesha whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't. I've tried to leave before, but he always finds me. He always brings me back. He said if I ever try to take Aaliyah away from him, he'll kill me, and I believe him. I know he'll do it. So I don't know what to do. I came here because I don't know where else to go. I looked at my sister, my identical twin, my other half, and I saw the devastating consequences of 3 years of systematic abuse. It had transformed this once vibrant, joyful, and loving woman into a mere ghost, a shell of her former self, someone who was simply waiting for death to claim her. And that's when I uttered the words that would irrevocably alter everything. You won't have to endure this any longer. Give me 3 days. Just 3 days of your life, and I promise you, he'll never lay a hand on you again. She stared at me as if I had lost my mind. What are you talking about? She stammered, confusion clouding her eyes. We're going to switch places, I declared, my mind already formulating a plan. You and I were identical. No one can tell us apart. You're going to stay here at my apartment, safe and protected, and I'm going to assume your identity for 3 days. I'm going to walk into that house as Kesha, and I'm going to make Marcus Johnson rue every single thing he's ever done to you.
Kenya, no.
You don't understand. He's dangerous. We'll be keeping a very close eye on this address. If we get called back here for any reason, if anything at all happens to your wife, you'll be arrested immediately. Do you understand? Marcus simply nodded mutely, completely humiliated and seething with suppressed rage. The police departed, leaving Marcus to grapple with the reality that he couldn't manipulate the law to his advantage and that he couldn't resort to physical force without facing serious repercussions. He was rapidly running out of options. But his twisted family wasn't done trying to regain control. That evening, Tamika made her move. She'd summoned her boyfriend, a hulking figure named Dre, standing 6 feet 4 inches and weighing in at 250 pounds of solid muscle. The plan was transparently obvious. Dre would intimidate me, maybe rough me up a bit, in order to remind me of what they perceived as my place. Tamika conveniently left us alone together in the living room. Dre approached me with that swaggering, overconfident demeanor of a man who's never been seriously challenged, especially not by a woman. So, I hear you've been giving my boy Marcus some problems, he said, his tone laced with menace.
Have I?
I responded calmly, carefully measuring the distance between us, closely observing his body language for any telltale signs of aggression.
Yeah.
And see, I don't like when women disrespect good men. Marcus, he's a good dude. Takes care of his family. And you out here acting up, causing drama. That ain't right. He reached out toward me in a threatening manner, and I moved instantly. One quick sidestep, I grabbed his outstretched arm, using his own forward momentum and my hip as a fulcrum. A basic judo throw, the kind I'd practiced thousands of times. Dre went flying through the air. All 250 pounds of him crashed spectacularly through the coffee table, landing in a heap of broken wood and shattered glass. He looked up at me from the floor, shock and pain etched all over his face. They're just flimsy pieces of paper. They don't stop bullets. They don't stop fists. They don't stop a man who's determined to hurt you. The family court system? It's a joke. Abusers lie through their teeth. They're master manipulators. They can charm the pants off judges and social workers, convincing them of anything. They'll paint their victims as unstable, as out for revenge, as the source of the problem, not the solution. And far too often they get awarded joint custody. They get visitation rights. They get to maintain access to the very people they've been terrorizing. So, no, I have zero regrets about bypassing the system. I don't regret taking justice into my own hands, not one bit. Because if I hadn't intervened, my sister would still be trapped in that house, still enduring the abuse, still living in constant fear.
And Aaliyah?
She'd be growing up believing that violence is a form of love, that abuse is just a normal part of life. I shattered that cycle. In just 3 days, I broke a pattern that could have continued for generations to come. Do you know what Aaliyah said to me just last week? We were at the park, just the 3 of us, me, Kesha, and Aaliyah. We were sitting on a bench, enjoying ice cream, watching the other kids play. Aaliyah looked up at me with those big, innocent brown eyes and said, "Aunt Kenya, thank you for saving my mommy." I asked her what she meant and she replied, "I used to be scared all the time. Scared of Daddy, scared of Grandma, scared to make any noise, scared to even be happy. But I'm not scared anymore. Mommy isn't sad anymore. And it's all because of you. That's why I did it." For moments like that, for a 5-year-old girl who can finally experience childhood without being gripped by fear, I want to speak to everyone watching who might be in a similar situation to what my sister was in. Maybe you're being hurt by someone you love. Maybe you're trapped in a relationship that's slowly destroying you. He'll hurt you, she protested, fear gripping her voice. I allowed myself a small smile, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile I reserve for opposing counsel right before I dismantle their entire case. Let him try. You need to understand that I'm not Kesha. I may look like her, sound like her, but I am fundamentally different. Kesha is gentle, soft, and kind. She chose to become a teacher because she wants to help children, nurture them, and build them up. She has never thrown a punch in her life.
Me?
I'm a criminal defense attorney. I've spent a decade in courtrooms facing down prosecutors, judges, and hostile witnesses. I've represented rapists, murderers, and drug dealers, not because I believe they're innocent, but because everyone deserves a defense. I've learned to be tough, calculating, and strategic. And outside of work, I'm a dedicated boxer. 3 times a week, I'm in the ring, hitting bags, sparring, and training. I know how to absorb a punch. More importantly, I know how to deliver one. So, when I walked into that house on Wednesday evening, when I used Kesha's keys to unlock the door and step into that suburban prison, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. I was a loaded gun, primed and waiting to explode. The house appeared ordinary from the outside. Nestled in a nice neighborhood, with a meticulously manicured lawn and a 2-car garage. But the inside, God, the inside felt like a tomb. Dark and suffocating. The very air seemed heavy with violence and palpable fear. I had barely closed the door behind me when I heard her, Diane's voice, sharp and demanding, cutting through the house like a knife. Kesha, is that you? Where have you been all day? You know Marcus gets home at 6, and dinner isn't even started. That's assault, I said calmly, my voice devoid of any emotion. In front of cameras, multiple cameras actually. They're all over this house, cleverly hidden, recording everything. So, if you want to try that again, go right ahead. I'll have you arrested for home invasion and assault. That carries a sentence of 5 to 7 years. Dre scrambled to his feet and fled from the house, as if his pants were on fire. Tamika unleashed a barrage of screams and insults, calling me crazy, calling me a demon. I simply smiled serenely and suggested that she should probably start looking for a new place to live. Marcus and Diane had witnessed the entire scene, and I could see the dawning of fear in their eyes. This wasn't the Kesha they'd grown accustomed to abusing. This was someone else entirely, something else. And they had absolutely no idea how to handle it. That night, I overheard them plotting, thanks to the hidden cameras and audio recorders I'd strategically placed throughout the house. They were huddled together in Diane's room, whispering like desperate conspirators. We can't let this continue, Diane said, her voice trembling with fear. This woman is destroying our family. What do we do? Marcus asked, his voice laced with desperation. We can't touch her. We can't call the cops. We can't intimidate her. We need to get rid of her, Tamika said, her voice dripping with venom. There was a long, pregnant silence. Not like that, Diane said quickly, clearly backtracking. But we need to remove her from the picture. Make her go away.
How?
Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sleeping pills, Diane said, a chilling calmness in her voice. We crush them up. Put them in her coffee tomorrow morning. Once she's completely out, we call mental health services. Tell them she's had a complete breakdown, that she's become violent and unstable. They'll take her away, probably put her in a psych ward for evaluation. Maybe you've tried to leave, but you keep getting pulled back in. Maybe you're watching this right now with your abuser in the next room, praying they don't realize you're listening to something that might give you ideas. Listen to me, and listen to me carefully. You deserve so much better. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve peace of mind. You deserve a life free from fear. I know it seems impossible to escape. I know he's told you 1,000,000 times that you'll never make it without him, that no one else would ever want you, that you're worthless, that you're crazy, and that it's all your fault. I know he's cut you off from your friends and family, isolating you. I know he controls your money, your phone, Your every move. I know he's threatened to kill you if you try to leave. I know he's promised to take your children away from you. I know he's said he'll hurt your family if you tell anyone what's happening. I know all of this because it's the same damn playbook every abuser uses. They're not creative. They're not original. They all follow the exact same pattern. Isolate, control, abuse, threaten, repeat. But here's the thing they don't want you to know. You can escape. You can survive. You can build a new life, a better life. It won't be easy. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done. You'll need help from family, from friends, from domestic violence organizations, from legal aid attorneys. You'll need to plan meticulously. You'll need to document everything. You'll need to be strategic and patient. But it is possible. I've seen it happen. I've lived it through my sister. If you don't have a sister like me who can swap places with you, that's okay. You can be your own hero. Start small. Document absolutely everything. Take photos of every bruise, every broken item, every threatening text message. Email them to a trusted friend or store them in a cloud account he doesn't know about. Build your evidence. I took a deep breath, channeling my sister, making myself appear smaller, hunching my shoulders, lowering my eyes, and walked into the kitchen, where Diane was seated at the table, a stack of magazines spread before her, and a glass of wine clutched in her hand. This woman had been living in my sister's house for 2 years, contributing nothing, and yet she had the audacity to complain about dinner not being ready. "I'm sorry," I said, adopting Kesha's soft, submissive voice. "I'll start it now." "You better," Diane retorted, not even bothering to look up from her magazine. "And make something good this time. Last night's chicken was dry." I opened the refrigerator, meticulously cataloging everything I saw, gathering evidence. Always building evidence. I pulled out the necessary ingredients and began to prepare dinner. And that's when Tamika sauntered into the kitchen. She was precisely as I had imagined her. Overweight, with badly dyed blonde hair, and an expression of perpetual contempt etched on her face. "Oh, good. You're finally home," she said, collapsing onto the living room couch. "Bring me a soda and some chips. I'm starving." I fetched her a soda, and as I handed it to her, I scrutinized her face, committing every feature, every expression to memory, contemplating all the various ways I was going to make her pay for her complicity in Kesha's suffering. Then Aaliyah came downstairs. My heart broke all over again at the sight of her. She bore a striking resemblance to Kesha as a child, big brown eyes, curly hair, and a smile that could illuminate an entire room. Except she wasn't smiling. She crept down the stairs like a timid mouse, trying to avoid making any noise, desperately trying not to be noticed. "Mommy," she whispered when she saw me. I knelt down and opened my arms, and she ran into them, and I held my niece for the first time in months, feeling her small body trembling against mine. And I made a solemn vow right then and there. This ends now. And while she's gone, Marcus, you file for divorce immediately and seek sole custody of Aaliyah. My blood ran cold as I listened to this diabolical plan, not because I was afraid for my own safety, but because they were plotting to drug me, to have me forcibly institutionalized against my will, and to snatch my niece away from her mother. These people had absolutely no limits, no boundaries, and no conscience whatsoever. Fine, neither did I. The next morning, I watched Diane carefully prepare my coffee, watched her deliberately crush 3 sleeping pills and stir them meticulously into my cup, watched her force a fake, saccharine smile, and bring it to me. "Here, baby," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with false concern. "You look tired. This will help." I took the cup, brought it to my lips, and pretended to take a long, satisfying drink. Then, when I was certain that no one was watching, I subtly poured the contents into a nearby potted plant. I settled onto the couch and began pretending to get drowsy, letting my head nod forward intermittently, closing my eyes partially, and consciously slowing my breathing. "It's working," Tamika whispered, her voice filled with malicious satisfaction. "Call the ambulance," Marcus said, his voice tinged with excitement. "Wait," Diane cautioned. "Make absolutely sure she's really out before we do anything drastic." I continued to keep my breathing steady, slow, and deep, allowing them to believe they had successfully executed their plan. Diane cautiously approached me and shook my shoulder gently. Kesha, can you hear me? I didn't respond, remaining limp and unresponsive. She's out, Diane said triumphantly. Call them now. That's when I dramatically opened my eyes and sat bolt upright. The three of them jumped back as if I'd literally risen from the dead. I didn't drink it, I said calmly, my voice devoid of emotion. I watched you crush the pills, Diane. Reach out to domestic violence organizations. They have resources, shelter beds, legal advocates, safety planning experts. They can help you create an escape plan that minimizes the risk.
Talk to a lawyer.
Many offer free consultations for domestic violence cases. Find out what your rights are. Find out what evidence you need for a restraining order, for custody, for divorce. Save money if you can, even small amounts, even just a few dollars at a time. Hide it somewhere safe. Build your escape fund. And when you're ready, when you have your plan in place, when you have your support system ready to go, leave. And don't ever look back. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The statistics are terrifying. The most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim is right after they leave. That's when abusers escalate. That's when they become the most violent. But staying is even more dangerous. Staying is a death sentence, just a slower one. My sister stayed for 3 years. 3 years of escalating violence. If she'd stayed any longer, Marcus would have killed her. I know it. She knows it. The only question was when, not if. So, she left. And yes, it was terrifying. And yes, Marcus tried to retaliate.
But she survived.
She's thriving now. And you can too. For those of you watching who aren't in an abusive relationship, I have a different message for you. Pay attention. Look for the signs. Your sister, your daughter, your friend, your coworker, they might be suffering in silence. They might be wearing long sleeves in the summer, canceling plans at the last minute, losing weight, seeming anxious or depressed, making excuses for their partner's behavior. Don't ignore the signs. Don't tell yourself it's none of your business. Don't assume they'll ask for help if they need it. Ask them directly. Find a private moment and say, "Are you safe? Is he hurting you?"
Give them the space to tell the truth.
Believe them when they do. Don't judge them for staying. No child should have to live in fear. Not in her own home, not ever. Around 8 o'clock, I heard the garage door rumble open. Marcus was home. My entire body tensed, every muscle coiled, ready for action. I was about to come face to face with the man who had spent the last 3 years terrorizing my sister. The man who had dared to put his hands around her throat. The man who had slapped a 5-year-old child. The door slammed open. He was already drunk. I could smell it from across the room. Bourbon and anger, a nauseating cocktail. "Kesha," he shouted, his voice slurring. "Where's my dinner?" He was tall, I'll give him that. About 6'2", probably 200 pounds. Handsome in that generic, cookie-cutter way that pharmaceutical sales representatives tend to be. Good hair, good teeth, and a well-tailored suit. The kind of man who effortlessly charms doctors and nurses into prescribing his company's drugs. The kind of man who knows how to conceal his true nature behind a veneer of superficial charm. But I could see through him. I could see the real him, the monster lurking beneath the polished exterior. "It's ready," I replied calmly, setting his plate on the table. I had prepared steak, mashed potatoes, and green beans, and I deliberately underseasoned everything, not enough to be overtly noticeable, but just enough to be subtly off-putting. He sat down, offering neither a thank you nor acknowledging anyone else at the table, simply picked up his fork and knife, cut into the steak, took a bite, and his face contorted in disgust. "I watched you stir them into my cup, and I've recorded every single second of it. Attempted poisoning. That's a Class B felony, with a potential sentence of 20 years minimum." Diane's face transformed from triumph to sheer, unadulterated terror in a split second. "I also recorded your little planning session last night," I continued, relentlessly pressing my advantage. "Conspiracy to commit forcible medical detention. Filing false reports with mental health services. Conspiracy to commit fraud, attempting to unlawfully institutionalize someone. Do you want me to keep going? Because I can. I'm a lawyer, remember? I know exactly what crimes you've committed, and I have the evidence to prove it. All three of them stood there frozen, paralyzed by fear. The walls were closing in on them, and they knew it. Here's what's going to happen now, I said, standing up deliberately and walking over to retrieve my bag. I pulled out a thick, well-organized folder, complete with tabs and color-coded sections. We're going to have a conversation about the future. Don't tell them what they should do. Just offer support and resources. And if you're in a position to help more directly, like I was, if you have legal expertise or financial resources or physical strength, use it. Use your privilege to protect people who can't protect themselves. The system is broken. It fails victims every single day. So, we have to be the safety net. We have to be the ones who catch people when they fall. We have to be willing to step outside our comfort zones, to take risks, to fight battles that aren't technically ours. Because domestic violence isn't just a private family matter. It's not just between a husband and wife, or a boyfriend and girlfriend. It's a social problem. It's everyone's problem. And it's going to take all of us working together to solve it. I used to think the law was enough, that if we just enforced existing laws better, if we just prosecuted more cases, if we just handed out longer sentences, we could end domestic violence. But I've learned that the law is just a tool.